I turned over a bright metal shell that rippled when
She says human longing for mystery leads to a commonality of belief in immortality.
Dad's late or I'm early. Either way, I have time to scout the pens. Kim...
Redemption and claustrophobia, what artists understand. Not valuing the
My name is Mary Kay Stillwell. I was born in Nebraska in Omaha, and I lived there until I was maybe 14, and then we moved to Fall City, Nebraska, where I lived until I went away to college. And then I lived in Kansas City and then moved on to New York until 1990. And then I came back to Fall City, then to Omaha, and then over here to Lincoln. I started writing after I moved to New York, but many of the first topics were Plains topics. I mean, I also wrote about where I lived, but I came back to the Plains, and it still is a great subject for me. Writers. I didn't write poetry until I went to New York, and there I signed up for a playwriting course at NYU that was canceled, and that was the first year that they had been computerized. And after visiting with registration, I very quickly saw I was never going to get my money back because nothing had been key punched. It was in the big mainframe days, and they were struggling with that. So I decided just to change and take poetry writing because I had promised a friend I'd go down to the village with her while she took the course. And although I didn't write poetry and really didn't care to read it much, I decided what the heck. And we had to read and write poetry immediately. I had been raised on poetry except for nursery rhymes, which I liked, and my mother liked Robert Louis Stevenson, so I heard a lot of Robert Louis Stevenson growing up. But I never cared for poetry. However, we used a text, which is the voice that is great within us of American poets. And we read Plath and Sexton and Lowell and Ginsberg and people that I could identify with, and that really got me writing. And my first poem in that class was probably the most frightening thing I have ever had to write on demand because I wasn't used to writing poetry, and it was called Express News. And I tried to find it today. I couldn't lay my hands on it, but it was something like, quick down the stairs, and if 5, please, the night before through the turnstile without getting anything caught. And then it described a subway ride downtown. And that was my first poem there. Daily life inspires me to write what I'm reading. I write to figure out what I think. So if I don't understand something, I tend to write about it until I sort of get it for myself. I don't think I have any particular topics, more about everyday life, what it is to live and do whatever we're living and doing, whether it's raising children, teaching classes, digging ditches, whatever. Other than saying I write almost exclusively in free verse, I'm not sure I have any other particular style. I think I write, my first audience is myself. I really have to figure out whatever I'm writing about for myself. And then I suppose I write for people like me, that this is my life and it probably corresponds to what's going on in their life, or will have resonances with what's going on in their lives. What would I tell someone who wants to write? First, to read a lot of poetry, because it's really inspiring to see what other people have done. It also can give you good hints about techniques that you might want to use. It gets you familiar with how poetry sounds. So to read a lot first, and then to write about things that are important to you, that you want to understand more, that really turn you on. I give them that kind of advice. In terms of publishing, when your poems get to a certain place and you think you can let them go, send them out, and don't take rejection personally. Just, it comes back, send it out, you know. Keep writing, you know. Take on more challenges for myself. I think I'm at a point now I want to do another book, maybe a thematic book on returning to the plains. It's cooking. It's not cooked yet, but, you know, I think that's the direction I'm heading in. As I also mentioned earlier, when I was about 14, we moved to the farm to outside Falls City, Nebraska. And I missed Omaha a lot. I missed my friends and my relatives and civilization. But I also fell in love with the farm. We had a timber where I'd go down. I was bribed with a horse. So I'd ride my horse and take the dog Buster down to the timber, and I spent many afternoons down there. And I also did a lot of farm work. We still milked cows in the olden days. And I always helped with haying and combining and stuff. And this particular poem is called The Cutting. The sun has pulled the dew from the grass, leaving the roots warm, humid, soft. The sky is blue, cloudless. We wait for the breeze. It comes. The cutting begins. I follow my father, my tractor after his. The umbrella shades him, vibrates above his head. My tractor after his, my circle inside the circle of his mower. I trace the boundary of his last round. I follow the tire treads with my eye, change gears for the first sharp turns, later follow rounded corners. Insects swirl from the grass, the heat presses up from the tractor, the sun shines. He leads, I follow, cutting farther and farther into the field center until one long swath remains. He signals and turns to watch. I circle and approach as the mower lays the final grass to rest. As I mentioned, I was living in New York when I first started writing poems, so I wrote a lot of New York poems too. And to live in New York is to be surrounded by water. And in the same way I loved the timber, I came to love the ocean. And so I'd like to read two poems from a series of poems called Fire Island Summer. And I'll just give you a sampling of the series. One of the banes of Long Island swimming are jellyfish, and they can come and just mess up the beach for, you know, a whole day, and you can't go into the water. And so this poem is about the jellyfish. Today, for the first time, strawberry jellies, larger than dinner plates, floating as thick and as quiet as stars. We keep a discreet watch, glancing from our beach blanket, from our fans of crazy eights, while we toy with the memory of seawater, the cool mist of waves at night, the first dive of other mornings, and by afternoon we are as crazy as our cards, as cranky as jellyfish, and as ready to sting. We turn away from each other, curl back against back under the shade of the beach umbrella, dangle our feet over the edges of our landboy, dig our toes deep into warm sand. We walk home only to walk back, measuring the distance between the jetties, counting our beached enemies, firm and faded now, some as clear in death as crystal paperweights, exact as cookie cutters. We bury them and go home for good, leave a scattered cemetery behind us. And then from part 5, a short section, The Frogs. It is August, and every night the frogs come out along the narrow walks, or so the neighbor says, to hunt mosquitoes. They are a small and quiet community, not the high jumpers I know from the rims of ponds in bright summer afternoons. Sometimes I imagine them pine cones scattered along the way. Sometimes I imagine if I follow them, they will lead me home. Living in New York, too, is great because it's a jumping off place to go to Europe. So I was fortunate to, you know how you wait until the last minute and you get on those cheap flights. Well, I was great at waiting for the last minute and getting on flights. And my first trip was to North Africa, and then from there I went up through Spain and on to Paris, where my ancestors had started out in the 1600s. They came over in 1660. So it was that was the first trip, and the poems tonight I'll read are just from that first trip. And one of the things that was interesting to me is, you know, you travel all that distance, and then you end up in a place that seemed very much like home. My grandparents, or my great-grandparents, actually settled in the Sandhills, and I spent a lot of time, summers growing up in the Sandhills. And to fly into Tangier, their airport is way out of the city, and you look down and it just looks like you're landing outside of Valentine. It's a very curious kind of experience. So, in the morning in Morocco. In the morning in Morocco, there are songbirds singing and roosters crowing, dogs barking, and a pneumatic drill being used on the sidewalk below. And I wake remembering these things from Omaha, as if the sound of the sea, of the gulls, were from Omaha too. Wake wondering that I have traveled so far to find dream and reality, and dream just touching at seams, like the panels of heavy curtains at the window touching, letting in this bright light along the edges. I'd also like to read a section from a mock epic that I wrote. And it started as an assignment, as a couple of you know. We took turns giving a little presentation on poetic forms, and the luck of the draw, I got the epic. And not only were you supposed to give a presentation, you were supposed to write a sample poem in that form. Well, I was pretty daunted by writing an epic until I figured I was going to write a mock epic. And so I chose for my heroine a lobster. And it was a wonderful freeing device because she could do a lot of things that I might want to do and never do. And she has a rich and colorful life that I envy. So I'll read you a little bit about her so you get to know her. But she also goes and travels abroad, and she has a Morocco poem. So I'll read hers. I'll read hers to you too. She went to Marrakesh, where I bought a rug. Claw, and this is from the prologue, which is called Bisque. What most people know about lobsters fills encyclopedias, databanks, banks of all kind, but I'm here to tell you how it really is for a lobster, on which you can generalize or not, depending on your temperament, empathize or not, again depending. See yourself in this lobster's pot if you have the inclination, a sort of Canterbury tale if you like, though this pilgrimage is to no worldly shrine, that is religious. This is a tale of structural adaptation. This is how it is. I'm walking down Flatbush just before the bridge, and it's rush hour, and crustaceans of all shapes and colors are inching and lurching to and fro. My skirt's blowing against my legs, swimmerettes, if you will, here and here, here and here, here and here, etc. There's a breeze, but it's going to get hot along Flatbush, so it feels so good to feel my skirt brush my swimmerettes, knowing I'm going home, inching back soon into cool water step by step, water over my claws, my carapace, from the tip of my antennae to the tip of my arched tail. Do I describe death? I hope not. Life is more than sun against the restaurant billboard, that certain yellow exhaust, those farts and belches marking human existence, mamas teetering down Flatbush, new ones on each hand like paper dolls on a chain. Blow, blow, blow the horn, horn, horn. Dredge the bottom, and what do you find? The past, bones, empty shells, used tires, darkness, shadows, me. I go slowly, walk carefully, camouflage easily, see poorly, eat anything, call me Claw. I won't read Paris because her Paris adventures are very long because Claw is into shoes. And she does a lot of shoe shopping while she's there. But this is her take on Marrakesh. It's her favorite color. Well, it may not be your favorite color because lobsters turn red, don't they, when they cook? So maybe it isn't. Marrakesh. This is the red city, the rose city. Buildings are rose. Flat falling sun is rose. Air and sky overhead are rose between the fingers of the palms. Listen. Prayers are rose, sent to us through the veins, generation to generation, to call rose from the Cortubia. Step closer. The bazaar is every color under the rose sun. Skin is every color, dye is every color, rugs every color, the water seller's robe. Bells ring everywhere. Spices meander narrow streets. Donkeys pulling carts are every color, lemon chicken, pigeon pie, those round gray eyes giving way to black brown. Silk is every color, brass, but the barber shops are cool blue tile, cool white tile, always shaded for fear of the straight razor. Step into the night, into inked indigo folds of loose-fitting robes and tight turbans, halftones everywhere, dancers, charmers, snakes, and baskets, and after the tourists are snug in their beds, dance. White pants flash like a saber, like a sword the sword swallower swallowed. And then I'll come back to the States and read Moving to Malibu. Moving to Malibu, I've never been to California, but every time I get really fed up with wherever I am, which can be here or New York or wherever, my fantasy is I'm going to go to Malibu. And by the time I arrive, I'll be blonde and thin, and I'll just run to the beach and, you know, it'll be great. This doesn't quite describe that, but it's in the whole notion of fantasy and how we make places for ourselves. Moving to Malibu. Some nights I think of it moving to Malibu just as I stretch like a cat Let me start again. Some nights I think of it moving to Malibu just as I stretch like a cat stretches to my full length, as though I'm easing into cool waters. I imagine the blue of the sea, the bright green leaves of the geranium on the patio, the bright pink blooms, the yellow sun and white sand. In the distance, white triangles. From the deck, wind chimes. I will be as content and as happy as Balboa. I will have breakfast at my wicker table and in my wicker chair with the cats watching. I will taste salt on my lips after coffee. My door will be open. When you come, you will carry a loaf of bread, a bunch of flowers. The sunlight is brilliant. We might as well be anywhere. And I guess while we're on the subject of love, I'd like to read Waltz. I better get a drink for this one. I don't think this needs explanation. Waltz. 1, 2, 3, now begin. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, they meet uncertainly. He steps back, she steps back, 1, 2, 3, they embrace. They dance tentatively, 1, 2, 3. She needs his music and he needs her music. That makes them dance 1, 2, 3. Moving together, they dance in wide circles. They move to the beat that is deep in their wantings, that burns in their dreamings, that touches the beauty that lives in their music. And 1, 2, 3 leads them to trust in their dancing, to love one another, to move through the night. As one grows older, and as we were talking right before the reading began, one experiences loss, and often that's of our parents. And I'd like to read 2 poems, one about my dad and one for my mom. My dad had a stroke, and so I have an older sister who still does part-time in Minnesota, and she and I met up in Omaha. I was still in New York, and we visited our dad, who by then, it was a severe stroke. Evidently he had had a few earlier, and they just went undetected, and this one really took one side of him. The hospital visits. Everything is not white, nothing is silent. Room 15, as definite as the jerk of the respirator, as clean as the cheekbones, as deep as our dark hair. Oh, white bed, you are not enough to save him. Even the doctors know. I don't want to know, my sister tells me again and again. We are here to see, she tells them. We care. Use no heroic means, she tells them. I will not interfere. Our kisses have left him exhausted. His pupils dilate. The next day he sleeps, and we twin candles light his bed. I am so tired. I want to lie next to him, feel his burn. We have been separated for too long, and there is such a fever between us. This will not do, of course. His eyelids flutter, he sees. There is such a wordlessness here. I need, or we need. I rub his legs, the dead one, the one with life. These are the heroic means, this life, this dying here. The poem, my mom died more recently, and we had a closed coffin because she had been dead for a little while before they were able to get in and get her. And so it sort of, I found out later that it deprived me of some sort of saying goodbye to her body. And so the poem grew out of just that need to see her again and touch her again. So Last Rites did that for me. She died at home in her favorite chair, which is where the poem begins. You are still stock still and tilting, dead in your favorite chair. And since I had no chance to place my hand against your cold cheek before they packed you away, I come to you now in winter, lift you into my arms, stretch your body out on the living room carpet, straighten your house coat, fit your collar in an attempt to put things right, to say goodbye. My fingers, bold as they never were with you alive, trace the flare of each nostril, your lips, note the knoll of each closed eye. My palms linger at your shoulders in the manner of your palms against the shoulders of my children. I dwell in the center of you again, trace your full length, find my way along your winding blue trails that I have recently discovered along my own legs as well. The corn has been harvested, the fields lie fallow, the moon just past full. Time to wrap you for the leave-taking, when I must abandon you along the river's edge, and you will desert me once again. In 1990, we returned to Nebraska, to Fall City, and Will was about 6 years old. And in 1992, we brought Anna home from Columbia. In between, we had adopted a daughter, Chloe, who had medical problems, and we were unable to bring her home. And between 91 and 93, I thought that I had just dealt with all this, the loss of Chloe. And then we lived on the campus of Metro Community College, in the Fort Omaha campus. And every September they had a big powwow, an intertribal powwow. And so I went down to the powwow, and during the powwow they have a circle dance where the whole community comes in and dances together. And at this particular circle dance, one of the families had lost a child who had been killed in an automobile accident. And before they could join the dance, there had to be a mourning and end of mourning ceremony. And so they were going through that before the circle dance, and I experienced something of the same thing going on, that I had to go through sort of a cleansing in order to get back into the dance of life. And so this is the circle dance. The great circle dance at the September powwow is about to begin. But this family has lost a child over the summer, and the grief must be combed from their hair before they can enter the circle. The mother walks the grasses to the west side of the circle. The father walks the grasses, and then the other children, then the aunts and uncles of this family who has lost one of its children to accident over the summer. They stand just outside the circle, and the old people come with finger combs and begin running them through the hair of the family, combing the grief from the mother, the father, each sister and brother, aunts and uncles, combing out the grief like snarls, casting out grief in tangles. On the north side of the circle, my scalp tingles. It is grief caught in my own hair, and I must comb it out too if I am to join the circle. I too use my fingers as a comb, pushing the hair up from the head and away so grief can loosen. This combing takes some time, and the family begins to cry, and the old people too begin to cry, and I on my side of the circle begin to cry. Tears and grief spill over my shoulders and run down my legs. Tears and grief spill over their shoulders and run down their legs. The earth receives it as rain, takes it in as if it were her own, because it is her own. From it she has already begun to fashion new children to send to us. We bow to the wisdom of the old people, enter the circle that we may dance. And then I'd like to finish up with more recent poems, 4 of them. They're sort of poems of, 3 are poems of everyday life here on the plains now that I live, and then the last one will take us back to the farm. My brother and I inherited 2 farms right next to each other, and we go down periodically and meet there. And that's how we'll end. But first I wanted to read January Snow, February Morning, and Between Sun and Moon. January Snow. New snow, rabbit tracks, 2 sets, shadow code, from Dominic's house, under the fence, across the yard, under the deck, and the willow hovers over silence. My grandfather's birthday. 2 children at my table, year of the snake, my son's year, my daughter's the monkey. Taking their hands, I take his, and the backyard is the white handkerchief he still carries in his left back pocket when I am fortunate to dream of him. Children, his eyes were as gray as the early winter's evening, and for a few years after his first breakdown, he lived with the Rosebud Sioux. Long after his second in a series of shock treatments, he danced through long Sunday afternoons, tapping his black Sunday shoes on the kitchen linoleum. Yes, the grackles tap the feeder. The phone line, heavy with white messages, lets them fall silent. The bird bath shivers without its bowl, and at night the cats prowl the basement, searching for mice. February morning. This morning at 16th and N, wide blue skies overhead, dirty snow left along the curbs, I saw a sign for the downtown health clinic, and I thought of the unexpected, how I had left my children at school minutes ago, and how Anna is just getting over her cold and Will's allergies have just kicked in since he got his kitten for Christmas. But they were basically well when I left them, basically happy, except for a spelling test coming up on Wednesday and the corn dogs listed for today's lunch on the cafeteria memo socked to the refrigerator door by the Tasmanian devil. How all of this could change with the light on O, and how their lives and mine might never be the same because of it. By noon, I said to myself, if the temperature holds, the snow will be gone. Not much else is certain. My grandfather had a whole story of games and stuff that he played, and one of my favorites was with the pan I think it was like aluminum that we did our dishes in, and he had a 50-cent piece that he'd always save for this, and he'd get it spinning, and it would just growl the way he did it. He'd get it going really fast, twirling inside. And the other game that I liked was the button on a string, and you'd put thread a string through two eyes of a button and get it going, and it would spin in the center. And we used to play that. I was mesmerized by this game. So that's the basic image, and I tell you that because it goes by quickly in the poem. Between the sun and moon. Through the windshield, the full moon sits like a communion wafer on the broad blue tongue of a late winter afternoon, and beneath it, trees raise their spindly arms in honor. Anna climbs up to slide down the hill of plowed snow, pineapple princess, queen of the mountain, waiting for her brother after soccer practice, the ball kicked high in the sky before me. Through the back window, above the kicked-up earth and muddy field, above the violet and peach, the sun hangs fire. I and the button strung between the hands of time, slack and taut, the hands move closer, then away. I sit silent, anticipate the exhilaration of spin. And now we'll go back to the red barn. We met an insurance fellow at the farm, which was the occasion of the poem. And while I was there, every time I would look at the barn or look at the farm, really, I was seeing it through the lens of the past. So I was there in the present, but I was hearing and seeing all these other things there as well. The red barn. See the pegs here, I said, and the insurance inspector, I can't remember what he said. The wide side door of the barn had been rolled open, and I could see two pegs holding a beam in place. The red barn color is a particular red. My stepfather worked steadily every day of his life there, keeping up the buildings, the barn, the corn crib, the milk and cob houses, the cattle shed, and the chicken coops, the lean-to. Later, he poured concrete where the manger had been, where I milked Roni and later chocolate before school because he thought there was money in hogs. I hear cows stomp for flies, pigs squeal, and this intense silence. If you want to insure the barn, he says, you'll have to nail over the sheets of corrugated tin. I look up, past the loft tight with bales, with the warm, sweet smell of living things all around, and the kitten the house cat finally had, the one that survived, and the feeding bin full of oats where the chute was worn smooth by the time I moved here, to where the owl sat every night like a stone column, his head cocked for field mice. And that's where we, and that's where we rang the hogs and put the heifers for shelter, and the roof lets in odd angles of gray steel sky. The two plots of land side by side have passed to my brother and me, and we each live our own 100 miles away and rarely see each other. It's the land that keeps us in touch. And if we don't sell, that we will pass to our 4 children who will remember their grandmother as an old woman. They will half remember the stories we force on them, and only then after we're dead and they have buried us. There is not corrugated tin enough to protect anything from weathering. There is no insurance with life benefits. A series of windows looked to the east to let in light for the pigs when they lay farrowing. It's only now I see that the windows overlook the road that took me elsewhere, that takes us all away, and then back home again. Thank you.